Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the first part thereof for the 26th of July 2025. Again, it's going to be another day of disrupted output. I have one of my boys has an all-day football tournament. I should be there now. I'm going to join it a little bit later than I should, but that's going to mean I'm going to be out of it for some time. So anyway, we'll start with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them linked in the description below. 1,080 personnel lost. That's over 1,000. That's better than it was when it dropped down below 1,000. Obviously, 7 tanks and 7 troop carrying AFVs are below the daily average. 7 tanks is pretty useful though in that category, considering that the Russians are using tanks far less than they were. 35 artillery systems, that is 10 above the daily average, so that's not too bad. I say not too bad, it's great if it's above the daily average, but it has been in the 40s and 50s. 2 multiple launch rocket systems and 158 vehicles with fuel tanks. That is a massive increase there, moving from below 100 regularly at the moment to 158. So I think the Russians may have picked up some attacks along the front. That's reflected by an uptick in personnel, a little bit of an uptick in tanks, and a big uptick in vehicles and fuel tanks. No Andrew Perpetual loss list today. Here is something concerning personnel losses that is somewhat controversial, very interesting. If you remember, back in January 2024, there was an IL-76 plane, a cargo plane, that was shot down by Ukrainians as it was flying in Belgorod airspace. The Russians claimed it was full of POWs. The Ukrainians denied this. There was supposedly an investigation. All the evidence pointed towards Russia talking nonsense because there were images from the crash. There was hardly any blood, no evidence at all of many dead people on board. The flight path for the plane suggested it would be very difficult to have picked up Ukrainian POWs. I think it had just come from Iran and then got to Belgorod and then took off from there. It was the evidence did not suggest it was full of Ukrainians. However, it could be somewhere in the middle here, so it could have had some Ukrainians on board. Funerals were finally held today in Lviv for 12 Ukrainian soldiers of the King Danilo Rifles who died in the IL-76 plane crash in Belgorod. They were POWs whom Russia says were being flown for an exchange in January 2024 when it was shot down. The incident is still being investigated now. If that is true, then that's pretty controversial. It could be that there were some POWs on board, but it could be that the Russians claimed these were POWs on board the flight and gave the bodies to the Ukrainians in one of the recent exchanges, but they weren't actually on board that plane. So there are still lots of theories that we could postulate here. Nonetheless, the claim is from the Russians that these were POWs on board the plane and they're finally being laid to rest in Lviv. A worst case scenario is that is true. And if these are the ones just from Lviv, how many were from other places? And could it have been true that the Russians claimed that there were, I don't know, something like 75, if I remember correctly, something like that, Ukrainians on board? I think it was 6 crew members. I mean, there were, as I say, loads of arguments against the Russian account of events there, but this is what Tim White is saying with regard to funerals from yesterday. Then we heard yesterday that the quite famous Russian mill blogger, a guy called Filov, Andrei Filov, I've actually referred to him on a number of occasions throughout this war. He's got a pretty sizable following on Telegram. I think it's Telegram. He supposedly died yesterday. His phone had some images on it of possibly an FPV coming to attack. There's an FPV just behind him there. Friends, today our friend Andrei Filov near Pokrovsky was hit by an enemy FPV drone. Neither Andrei nor people who were at the scene at that moment have contacted the area where Andrei disappeared is under fire from Magyar. According to updated information, contact was lost early in the morning. Personal belongings were found at the scene. He was not admitted to any hospital. Update: a motorcycle, personal belongings, and a camera on a motorcycle were found at this scene. So that is really significant if he has died. Then today we hear that this footage has come out to show that it was a close call, but it doesn't really track with what you saw in that post. So it could be that he was then subsequently hit. I'm probably going to get in trouble for showing this. I'll keep it on a smaller sized image. So he appears to be riding, I don't know if he's standing there, if that's an electric scooter or an electric bike. There's very little sound of the engine, so it is some kind of electric vehicle, I think. And he then turns around and goes his own way, but it doesn't make sense that his personal belongings and motorbike were found.
Здесь.
As you can hear, that very much sounds like an electric
Вообще
vehicle.
похуй. Поехали? Да. Ох ты, блядь.
And that's the point that the still images were taken from yesterday that led people to think he had been killed by that drone, but actually it was a near miss. But still, I think there are some questions to be answered because, well, by all accounts, he hadn't been in contact and his belongings were found. So who knows? He may well have taken one for Team Russia, or he may still be alive, but he is quite a prominent mill blogger serving near the front, or on the front lines by the looks of it there. Okay. General Serski, the commander-in-chief of the Ukraine, said Russia is paying the maximum price for the attempted summer offensive. The hottest areas are Pokrovsky, Novopavlivsk, Severno-Slobozhansky, Dobropilya, Liman. Our soldiers are courageously holding back the onslaught and destroying the occupiers, he said. So, saying, I guess, the right things there. It is tough in certain areas along those fronts. There are still claims that the Russians are mounting forces in the Zaporizhia area. That's been claimed over the last 24 hours as well. We shall see. What do we have here? A Russian motorcyclist. Incredibly lucky here. Another close call in this astounding bit of footage. That drone flies just in front of him, and it doesn't trigger the impact, doesn't trigger the explosive, and he gets away with it. What a lucky man. Wow. Absolutely incredible there. And of course, for a number of videos that we see of people getting blown up by IEDs and drones, FPV drones, there will be an awful lot of drones that aren't successful. So I don't know what the updated figures are for the proportion of drones that attack that are successful, but it's not going to be anywhere near 100%. I remember reading earlier on in the war that something like 17%. So in other words, most drones are unsuccessful. But I don't know that that's the case anymore. Magyar came out with some stats recently which suggested the vast majority were successful. But of course, he's got units that are very, well, they're tried and tested, aren't they? Okay. Here we have the Ukrainian Air Force figures for the air defense success rates. The Russians attacked Ukraine with quite a lot more drones and certainly a lot more missiles last night. 208 drones, Shahid and other types, and 27 missiles were thrown into Ukrainian airspace. So it's a pretty considerable amount of missiles, considering that actually the number of missiles that Russia sends now is a fraction of what it used to send at the beginning of the war. I wonder if Dell's stats can give us a sense of that. Let's have a look. And thank you, Dell, for continuing to do these. You are an absolute star, one of the legends of the universe. Not the multiverse, but legend of the universe, certainly. Cruise missiles, remember, these are successful takedowns. If you look at the stats here, I know my head's in the way, you can see that around this time, routinely over 40 earlier in the war, and then a few points around here, and then some really high numbers over at this end of the graph. But lately, far fewer examples of getting over 40, but fairly, I guess, consistently around the 20 mark maybe. So yeah, maybe swings and roundabouts there, really. Actually, I'm going to get rid of my face. There we go. So yeah, could be swings and roundabouts. So certainly fewer missiles than at this stage in the war, but it's been really inconsistent since then. Maybe stockpiling quite a bit around this period in order to get these days where you got well over 100, or over 100 on those occasions, and that would be actually well over 100 in terms of missiles sent, because these are only the ones that are intercepted. Yeah, so it's worth putting this in context. 27 is, I think, fairly decent for the number of missiles we can expect at the moment from a Russian point of view. 208 drones sent in, 183 taken out, so that's not bad stats really for interceptions. 17 out of the 27 missiles taken out. There were 12 Iskander M, so 12 ballistic missiles sent, 8 Iskander K and 7 KH-59 or 69. If you took out 100% of the cruise missiles, that'd be 15. But there are 17 missiles shot down. So at least some of the Iskanders were shot down. I'm guessing they probably did all right with shooting the Iskanders down. And a number of the cruise missiles got through as well. But they will be hitting sensitive targets, no doubt. Most of those targets appear to have been in the north of Ukraine. That looks like, is that Chernihiv? It's not Sumy. Yeah, it might be Chernihiv there. That's Chernihiv, though. Let's go and look at the map. I think that's a place called Shotska. Again, that has been absolutely hammered recently. Yeah, it's most likely Shotska. I don't know what's there, but something is there, evidently. It's fairly close to the Bryansk border, the Russian border going into Bryansk Oblast. So, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Shotska, something is there. And then we have Kharkiv was on the target list, and Dnipro itself, Zaporizhia too. So these major cities in the east being targeted quite routinely at the moment. A few others thrown into Ukraine elsewhere. Okay, what do we also know? It's reported that the Russian Garan 2, or the Shahid drone, they are now maneuvering unpredictably over Ukraine. Ukrainian interceptor drones are guided by radar to a point on the Garan 2's route in advance. So this countermeasure of a less predictable route will complicate interception. That is, the Russians adapting to the countermeasures of the Ukrainians already. So the Ukrainians will look at some of these routes, and they'll think, okay, you're flying over here, you're going in this general direction, we'll send the drone up over here, right? But actually it doglegs and goes somewhere else, and then the intercepted drone is rendered impotent. So if you look at some of these routes here on the map, they actually do look to be somewhat more unpredictable. So you're coming down here, they're going around here, and then coming, so that's probably to evade some air defenses in Poltava. There's a bit of a curl around there, a bit of a curl around here. So rather than go directly to this place, such as this drone does, right, comes all the way down there directly, they're coming down here and doing a dog leg. So when they're coming down here, you might set off some interceptor drones down here, and they dog leg and come back round to somewhere else. So that could be what I'm sort of just speculating here, just looking at that map. But the claim is that there are more unpredictable routes for the Russian drones these days. Now, one way of shooting down these drones is to have helicopters operate, and they are pretty effective by all account. They're somewhat cost effective. The issue is they just don't have enough helicopters to do this. But a stunning video, says Special Kherson Cat, showcasing a Ukrainian helicopter or helicopter crews intercepting Russian drones in the skies above Ukraine. So that's a montage. You can go and watch 1 minute, 11 seconds worth of Ukrainian helicopters taking out Russian Shahed drones a number of times there. It's a pretty interesting video. Right, moving on. What did Russia do overnight then? Russia launched another massive overnight strike attack on Ukraine. In Dnipro, a residential building was hit. One person was killed, several injured. Fire broke out. Over 10 cars there were destroyed. In Kamyanska, an epicenter, that's a bit like, I guess, UK sort of B&Q home base, kind of like DIY center, Home Depot, I guess, in the US. Store caught fire after impact. Smoke covered cities across the country. There's the residential building in Dnipro that was struck. A ballistic missile, I believe, hit the top of the building. That looks to be not indeed a military target. Here's the epicenter superstore, DIY superstore. More footage from Kamyanska, Dnipropetrovsk region shows a shopping center destroyed by a Russian strike. Of course, this massive impact on the economy, jobs, tax income, just a real shame here, and arguably another war crime for the Russians. They just don't seem to stop. Russia launched yet another massive attack on Ukraine last night, says Gerashenko. Kharkiv was struck by 4 guided aerial bombs, 2 ballistic missiles, and about 15 drones. A civilian business, transportation infrastructure, and a city boiler facility were damaged. In Kamyanska, windows were blown out of residential buildings. Other destruction also reported. 5 people were injured, including 3 rescuers who were wounded during a repeat strike after they had arrived at the scene, so double tap there. 7 fires are currently being extinguished in the Kievsky district. That sounds like Kharkiv, the photo, that video is from Kamyanska. He was still talking about Kharkiv there. In Dnipro, a man was killed in the apartment building. Emergency crews were working to clear the rubble. As a result of the attack on Dnipro and the surrounding area, 2 people were killed and 5 were injured overall. A man died and a woman was wounded. A residential building was destroyed. Windows were shattered in about 20 apartments. Industrial facilities damaged. Fire broke out in the parking area, destroying around 10 vehicles. In the Dnipro district, 1 person was killed and 4 more injured. Fires erupted at both a shopping centre and an industrial site. And then Kamyanska, a ballistic missile hit the epicenter shopping mall, so obviously a military target. Yeah. Sparking a major fire. The state emergency service and other first responders are on site. Details about casualties are still being clarified. So those are details at the moment. Looks mainly to have been strikes on civilian infrastructure, but of course the Ukrainians won't let you know if the Russians have successfully hit military targets. So there is a high likelihood that there were military targets aimed at, of course, during last night's attack. There's footage of the residential building in Dnipro. Showing, actually, you can see the moment a Russian missile hit. A pretty substantial explosion at the top of that building in Dnipro. Another act of terror against civilians. And there you see it. That's the building on fire. Photo from the scene at Kamyanska. That's the epicenter shopping. It's not a shopping center. It's a shop, isn't it? I guess. In Kamyanska and Dnipropetrovsk, 6 ballistic missiles have been fired at Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Kamyanska. 7 actually in all, as we found out in the end. The aftermath, so this is then going back a day. This is Kharkiv, where a medical center was hit with guided glide bombs. This is the medical center there. As you can see, clearly, I would say a war crime. Again, every single day is another Russian war crime. Building suffered heavy damage. At least 12 people were injured. 1 person was killed. And then we hear that the Russian Federation, this is a CNN investigation, has significantly expanded and continues to expand the Shahed production plant in Alabuga. So the Yelabuga production plant in Tatarstan apparently, according to CNN, is getting massively extended. On the active expansion of the plant, there will be workshops and premises for employees. Over 8 new buildings have appeared in recent months. The number of dormitories has increased from 15 to 104. 15 dormitories to 104. Up to 40,000 people can potentially live here, which is equal to an increase in the number of the drone production. So a massive output increase here. They've scaled up hugely. Yellow Boog has completely switched to localization of production with its own forge, microelectronics and assembly unit. Teenagers are sent there after grade 9. That's what I've reported on previously. And student brigades and foreign labor recruits also work at the plant. Among them are young people aged 15 and over, including students and women. We know they get women from Africa. They're seeking to get employees from North Korea as well. This is a massive problem. Ukraine needs to absolutely blitz that place with everything they've got. It has to happen. Now, Ukraine did have a fairly wide-scale attack overnight here. Max 25 says a massive attack. Crimea was targeted. Looks like maybe occupied territories in Ukraine. Then you've got Voronezh, Lipetsk, Tambov, Penza, Bryansk, and then going eastwards to Volgograd, Rostov Oblast, and Krasnodar as well. So many of the usual places. We don't have too much detail about what was successfully hit, other than one particular place, and this was Russia's signal plant in actually, where is it? Stavropol. So this is in Stavropol. So Ukrainian drones reportedly hit Russian military plant under international sanctions. 2 strikes hit critical production areas at Russia's signal plant, destroying control machinery and radio electronics workshops that supply equipment to the Russian military. And you can see this from like 37 different angles. Everyone seems to have recorded these Luti drones, or at least one drone hitting the workshops there. Ukrainian Telegram channel citing SPU sources report that one strike at the signal plant at Stavropol hit building number 2, which contains expensive imported CNNC equipment. Another strike hit building 1, which we haven't seen, home to a key radio electronics workshop. I think all of these are the same strike from lots of different angles, and it is pretty interesting. You got your Luti drone by the looks of it there, freely able to just slam right into the side of that building, seen from every conceivable angle. As I say, Russian signal plant Stavropol targeted by new Ukrainian drones, which visually resembles Shahid. That wasn't a Shahid, that was definitely a Luti drone. Yeah, so that's a Luti drone. However, if we have a look at, no, that's a Luti again. Ukrainian drone hit the signal military plant in Stavropol. So it makes electronic warfare systems for aircraft and ground equipment, including the Topol-E. The strike likely targeted a workshop storing already made ammunition. Now, possibly, no, this is the new type of drone. This is Stavropol. Let's have a little look. And it's basically, the drone looks like a Shahid. There you see it. That's not the drone that slammed into that building. I would like to know how fast that drone is going as well, in comparison to Shahids. It's going to make it fairly difficult to hit with small arms fire, because that to me seems to be going at quite a clip. Don't know if there's anything else to see on this.
Не, дальше полетел. Дальше куда-то летит. Сука, гандон.
There you go. Explosion over there. So that is your second drone then, but 2 different types of drones, the Luti and the Shahid equivalent. Now, the Russians, so we'll wait to see if there's any more BDA coming out from both there and anywhere else in Ukraine, in Russia, sorry. This is from 2 nights ago. The Russians report a Ukrainian Pulse electronic warfare jamming drone accompanied the recent drone strike on Sochi. Pulse jammers send out brief, intense bursts of energy to disrupt radar and communications systems. The Russians admit that this resulted in the failure of some of their air defenses. So if you remember, the Pantsir, probably a Pantsir, sent up a missile that then flew into a residential area, so it went up and down. That could be explained by the Ukrainian jammer drones coming alongside these other drones to send the air defense awry. So the pulses must be synchronized to match the timing or frequency of the target radar or communication system for maximum disruption. This overpowers the target system's receiver, causing temporary overload or false detections. So that's a claim there. Right, we're going to go on to other bits and pieces. And we're going to start with, according to the Vision of Big News, the armed forces of Ukraine have eliminated all Russian assault groups that have entered the city of Pokrovsky. Asterisks for this, as I will explain in a second. So 2 days ago, Russian assault units managed to break into the southern part of the city, specifically the Shakhtarsk district, capturing a significant area that included dozens of civilian homes. They also took several buildings hostage and set up ambushes targeting Ukrainian soldiers in the controlled zones. Upon receiving this information, Ukrainian forces launched immediate countermeasures. Special operations forces were deployed to the area and began clearing operations in the southern part of the city. Between 30 and 50 Russian special forces operatives were neutralized. Most of them were killed. Some tried to escape disguised in civilian clothing, but they were identified and eliminated as well. So that's a claim from a pro-Ukrainian source. Playfra, which is pro-Ukrainian as well, says, info from the field, the situation in Pokrovsk remains bad. The Russians found weaknesses in the defense and are penetrating, exploiting that. DRGs, deep reconnaissance groups, are still in the city, contrary to what some pro-Ukrainian sources are saying. Oh, sorry, just had to die a little then. In Stavropol, they're occupying a grey zone. From here, it will not get any easier. So, uncomfortable news coming from there. Some good news according to certain sources, and then more nuanced news coming from other sources. So, again, take everything with a pinch of salt. Now, it seems to have resurfaced the story about Elon Musk ruining the counter-offensive, or some plans for the Ukrainians during the Kherson counteroffensive and attacks on Crimea as well. If it weren't for Elon, the Kherson counteroffensive could have been much more successful for Ukraine. Around this time in 2022, Elon was also sharing David Sax's preposterous peace plan, which would have given Putin everything he asked for. This is coming from a Reuters article. A special report, Musk ordered the shutdown of Starlink satellite services as Ukraine retook territory from Russia. Here's an excerpt from the article. This is genuinely shocking, says Chris Owicki. Upon Musk's order, Ukrainian troops suddenly faced a communications blackout, according to a Ukrainian military official, an advisor to the armed forces, and 2 others who experienced Starlink failure near the front lines. Soldiers panicked, drones surveilling Russian forces went dark, and long-range artillery units reliant on Starlink to aim their fire struggled to hit targets. As a result, the Ukrainian military official and the military advisor said troops failed to surround a Russian position in the town of Berislav, east of Kherson, the administrative centre of the region of the same name. The encirclement stalled entirely, said the military official in an interview. It failed. So Elon Musk was responsible for a failed military encirclement. Elon Musk. Here, Timothy Milovanov summarises the article. Elon Musk ordered a blackout Starlink coverage during Ukraine's counteroffensive in Kherson in September 2022. SpaceX engineer Michael Nichols says, we had to do this. 100 plus terminals went dark. Drones died. Comms failed. Ukraine failed to encircle Russians at Berislav, according to Reuters. The blackout hit Kherson and parts of Donetsk around September the 30th. Ukrainian troops lost contact, lost drone feeds, and failed to encircle Russians at Berislav. A frontline officer said the encirclement stalled entirely. It failed. Musk acted days after Putin threatened nuclear retaliation in September 21. September 21st. He feared Ukrainian gains would trigger escalation. He spoke with US officials, then gave the order. In 2023, Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX president, said they blocked Ukraine from using Starlink for drone strikes. There are things we can do and have done. She gave no details. Musk posted, "My Starlink system is the backbone of the Ukrainian army. Their entire front line would collapse if I turned it off. Ukraine runs on Starlink. By April 2025, it used over 50,000 terminals. Poland bought 25,000 of them. Kiev used Starlink for drones, encrypted comms, and state cloud access. 3 people with direct knowledge confirmed Musk's role. One said he took the outcome of the war into his own hands. This marked the first battlefield shutdown Musk ordered. Musk denied everything. We would never do such a thing. SpaceX called Reuters reporting inaccurate, gave no corrections, and refused all questions. SpaceX now operates 7,900 satellites, 66% of everything in orbit. Starlink brings in $9.8 billion a year. That's 60% of SpaceX's revenue. So lots of people railing against this military news UA here and others. It is not gone down well again, this reporting on the influence Musk has had on military matters in Ukraine. Now, Russian central bank lowers its interest rate from 20% to 18%. Central bank has kept raising the interest rate since September 2022, when it stood at 7.5%. By October 2024, the rate had climbed to 21%, the highest in modern Russian history, where it remained through early 2025. There are pros and cons to doing this. It will affect the cost of things. What they're trying to do is get investment, and I think this is a reflection that it's too expensive to borrow money, and therefore no one's going to be investing by borrowing money to start up some new startup or building or whatever. And so with the Russian economy in the state it's in, they want to start attracting investment, but 18% central bank interest rate is still pretty prohibitive. Okay, there's still been protests in Ukraine over the law, but what's fascinating and not a good sign is you started to see masked, usually young men, on the streets with flares and with posters that are anti Zelensky, really, rather than being anti-law. So the protesters have been anti the law. But on the third day of protest, says Euromaidan Press, against the law to gut Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies, mysterious young masked men appeared carrying signs inciting action against Ukraine's government, not demanding to repeal the law like everybody else. Appearing right before the protest dispersed, the men lit up flares and disappeared. Ukraine's intelligence warned Moscow may inspire provocative actions to escalate protests, deepen divisions, and create chaos in Ukrainian society, ultimately to weaken state stability during this war for Ukraine's survival. Judging from what transcended afterwards, this was a classic Russian influence operation. So that's reported by Euromaidan Press here, and you see images like this that clearly, I think, suggest that there are other actors with more nefarious intentions at play there. Okay, I'm going to leave you with some good news. This is a Ford Transit, vehicle number 7 from the Summer Sunshine campaign for Kharkiv, Ukraine, sponsored thanks to ATP Geopolitics and the team, and you guys, you, I can see you, you're there. Thank you. This one is heading to the 6th Special Separate Forces Unit of Ukraine's intelligence service. Ooh, so check us out. Looks like that vehicle has come from Poland. Anyway, Ford Transit there, fighting for freedom and truth. Yay, ATP Geopolitics. There we are. Check it out. Helping out. Thank you guys for supporting. In fact, here we have David Lewis, Peter Kluken, David Sengelman. Really big supporters there. Then just below that, Richard Jackson, John Hazel, Mark S., and all of those people on the list. Thank you. You guys are absolute legends. Really appreciate it. We are helping and hopefully making a difference. I'm just going to go and try and recover my throat. I'm dying a little bit each successive day at the moment. And I'm going to go and watch my boy play some football. I'll be back later for some more videos, I hope. Take care and speak to you soon.